Hey guys, it's Jacob, your host from the All Things Running podcast, and today we have a really good one. I chatted with Matt Fox, founder of Sweat Elite. Personally, I've been a huge fan of his work, specifically with regards to the YouTube channel, which I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with. I've seen all of his videos ever since the first one with Parker Stinson, and so it was really cool to chat with someone who I'm a big fan of. Um, and also talk a little bit on his origins in the sport, coming from a middle distance background and competing on the international circuit for over 8 years, and running as fast as 146 in the 800. So he came from a really fast background, and now he is training to run sub 218 at the Berlin Marathon, which is coming up in about 5 weeks. So clearly he's a very versatile athlete. I'm sure you guys will enjoy this one. It was really cool to talk to him about his company and his origins in the sport, and what he hopes to accomplish at Berlin. And I hope you enjoy. If you do, obviously, I would appreciate if you rated the podcast, gave it a 5-star review. Otherwise, just don't rate it. I don't need it. But enjoy this one, guys. Thanks. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Jake, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I
Just
can
one
hear you
second, I'll get the
good.
video going. There we go. We're set.
Awesome. We're doing it. It's happening.
Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you
happy
for
to join.
coming
Sorry
on.
for rescheduling a couple of times, but now's a good time. So
How'd your meeting go yesterday?
good. All,
Good.
yeah, I read your question about can I share.
I assume you probably
I
can.
can't share very much at this point because it's all under contract and it's all a little bit evolving, I guess. I'll think about how to sort of say something that's a little bit, it's not going to get me in any sort of trouble. But yeah, so far it's going well. There's a lot of administration work to do, but yeah.
Good. All right. Well, we'll
Yeah.
get
How's things with
started.
you?
All right. I got a back injury, so I'm a little bit on the sidelines right now, but taking
Oh,
this
I'm sorry, man.
opportunity to talk to cool guys like you, and it's been a good time.
Thanks.
So, I'm enjoying it.
Okay. So is
But
a back injury
anyways,
set you off? You can't run at all, or just easy running, or?
yeah, three weeks until I'm back. I'm with PT now. Guy who seems
Okay.
like he knows what he's talking about. So, but I've had a lot of
Mhm.
time off. So yeah, I'll be
Okay.
back though. I'll be back.
You'll
Nonetheless,
be
this is
back.
about you. So let's talk about you, Matt. First of all, I just want to give a background in you. So for all the listeners, this is Matt Fox that I'm talking to right now, founder of Sweat Elite. Um, in high school, you played football until you got injured, and senior year, you went and decided to do track, and you did the 800, which
That's
actually
right.
was very surprising to me. For some reason, I did not know that you were a middle distance guy originally.
Oh yeah,
I
I was
believe you
actually
said
very
that in Sweat
yeah, I
Elite
was very
videos.
serious about it for probably about 8 years in the end. I was very serious about the 800. I tried to qualify for 2 Olympics, of which I didn't on both occasions, but I was sort of in the Australian national championships final a number of times. But I was never top three. So yeah, I was quite serious about it. But sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no worries. When I was doing some research, I found a Matt Fox on World Athletics, and I was like, this can't be him. Like, he's a marathoner. Like, I actually I closed out of the tab because I didn't think it was you, and then I did some more research. I was like, oh wait, that's him.
It is.
Um,
Yeah.
I saw like a 49 400, and I was like, is that the same guy I've seen on YouTube?
Yeah.
But
Geez,
we'll
I'd
get
be lucky
into
to run a
that.
59 now, but
I was
yeah,
actually
somehow
gonna
I
ask
managed
you
that.
I was gonna ask you what you think you could run now. Actually.
Or now I reckon if I put spikes on and I tape it down a little bit, I reckon maybe 54,
Okay.
53 at best. But
Okay.
in training when there's guys ripping 30-second 200s around me, I honestly have a bit of a hard time running 30 seconds for 200 at the end of a workout. So it's funny how your physiology changes when you switch to the marathon. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was kind of curious as to how much of the speed would really carry over. And we'll get into that, but I just want to continue in your background. So, you
Sure.
were 800-meter runner in high school, your senior year, and then going into college, you, so this was all part was a little blurry for me in my research. You went to
Mm,
Griffith University from 2005 to 2010 for,
that's right.
uh, you study economics and finance. And it
That's right.
said you also went to Texas A&M for a full ride in 2007.
I did. I went for what was supposed to be 4 years. So I basically did a year of I was part-time university most of the time because I was trying to qualify for these teams. So I did my whole degree. Sort of, you're supposed to do 4 subjects every semester. I did either 2 or 3, just because I was racing in Europe quite a few of those years too. But I did 1 year in Australia, and then I was offered a full ride to Texas A&M, and I did only 1 semester, and I had a difficult time there. I was injured most of the time. I really missed home, honestly. I was 19. I think at the time it was just too much of a shock, culture shock for me. Now I'm all about culture shocking as a 35-year-old, but back then I think it was a bit challenging of a transition. So I was there for a semester, but I decided to come home and continue back in Australia at my degree. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that clears that up. That makes sense now. And post collegiately, you kind of mentioned this, but for a long time there, you were a very competitive middle distance athlete. You competed on an international circuit, Australian, American, and European, from 2006 to 2014, and you placed 5th at the Australian track and field championship, which is pretty awesome, pretty incredible if you ask me. Very impressive. In 2009 and 2011, I actually watched one of the videos. I was tempted to bring it on to share my screen and play it, but
oh man, I haven't watched that for a long time. That would have been
I'll
cool.
send you the
Actually.
link after or something. It's on YouTube. I want to keep going. So there's a lot to talk about. You've done a lot. So you've had some pretty crazy PRs. Pretty easy to find your PRs on World Athletics. 346 in the 1500 in 2009. Then a year later, you ran your 800 meter PR at 148. And then you ran a 49 400 the next year in 2011. And then since then, you had a little bit of hiatus from the fastest times you were running. And then in 2019, you ran your 30 41 10K, and then followed that up 2 years later with your Indianapolis Marathon 220 46. So a lot of really impressive PRs. It's
they're very spread out over a long period of time, aren't they? But
World Athletics went from 2012 to like 2019 or something in terms of your PRs.
Yeah. Well, I did continue racing middle distance and through until 2014 was my last year, but I was riddled with injuries that year, so I didn't really do much. And that's when I decided to stop. And then I basically took 2.5 to 3 years more or less off. Well, I took a job in Singapore that was very full on. I was still running, but I wasn't very fit. I was probably in 40-minute, 10K shape for a while. I was just sort of doing it socially. And then it was a challenge. It sort of started by a challenge from a friend who thought that I couldn't break 3 hours for a marathon because he thought I was too fast twitch. And that sent me down this long path of chasing marathon times, which I never would have guessed at the time when I ran the first marathon in 2:59, obviously, 2:59:32 or something like that. I just thought that was fun, and I thought it'd be good to see how much faster I could get. I think that was the end of 2017. I think that first marathon it was in Finland, a small one. But yeah, so fast forward a few more years, and here we are trying to run under 220. So
yeah, you're gonna have some of the craziest range out there after you get that sub 218 you're going for, and we'll talk about that too. But I would be terrified if I was near the end of a race and you were beside me, knowing your history in middle distance running.
I wouldn't be knowing I can't really break 30 seconds anymore for a 200, but I guess people don't know that, but yeah,
I guess people just kind of assume, like, they see those times and they kind of assume that you still have that speed, but it is crazy kind of how fast you can lose that speed if you no longer touch that system as much.
Sometimes in training when I'm doing really fast stuff with like 200s at the end or 400s in 60, maybe just under 60, I seriously sometimes think, how did I run 2 laps in 54? Like, I don't know how I did that, but anyway, it's you do really change, and as you get older you get a little bit more fragile and a bit slower. So it's funny how it works.
So first of all, I want to say I'm a huge fan of Sweat Elite, and I've actually been watching your videos ever since they came out. First one, I think it was Parker Stinson, was your first video, I believe. And I actually watched that one, like, I think it was like the day after it came out. It was a good time for you to start posting because it was COVID, and I was bored. And I always am into those like workout videos. And I saw that one on my recommended. I clicked on it and I was hooked. So I've been pretty sure I've watched every single video of yours. I mean, I'm a big fan. So it's
I'm really, really honored to hear that because, that first video, it didn't get a lot of views initially. I think it was sort of stuck at around that 1,000. I mean, that 1,000 views is great. Don't get me wrong. but it didn't really go much past that. So you were one of the really early discoverers of the videos, which is awesome. It was really about the fifth or sixth ones. I think it was the Sara Hall videos. I think it was episode 5 and 6, or maybe it was 4 and 5. That's when they really started to gain traction, and I started to see the view counts jump up to 30, 40, 50,000. But yeah, that first one or two were a little bit slow to gain traction. But I think comparing to other YouTube channels, it did have a relatively fast start anyway. But that's awesome to hear, man. That's really cool that you tuned in so early on.
Yeah. So we don't have to talk about this long. I want to talk about your origin story a little bit. I know I kind of went over it very briefly, but I would be curious to hear kind of what piqued your interest in going into track your senior year of high school. I know you were injured up from football. So yeah, how did you get into 800, and how are you here now doing the marathon? And you don't have to take forever to explain, but
No, I'm happy to give you a 1 to 2 minute version. So I was very, very obsessed with Australian football through high school. And anyone that wants to know what that is, but the easiest way is definitely just to throw it into YouTube, and you'll get a couple of explanations. It's very different to American football, or soccer for that matter. But I was very much focused on trying to make that league as a high schooler, and I was sort of in the mix, I guess. And yeah, in that 1 year that you're drafted to the Australian Football League when you're a 17-year-old, and they're looking at in the first game of the year, I broke my wrist very badly. I snapped it in 2 places. I had to have surgery. I had to have it all stitched up, and I was basically out for the entire year. Now, prior to that, I was mostly doing sprinting. I was sort of reasonably quick over 100 and 200, nothing that fast. And every time the school cross country would come up, I'd often find excuses to not run it, or I used to hate long distance stuff. I was also a pretty decent swimmer, a sprint, 50 and 100 meters. So I was all about the speed in the beginning when I was younger, and the sprints. And then it was about, okay, I thought to my whole psychology around distance running changed when I had this injury, because I thought, if I want to have any chance of making the Australian Football League the following year, which you can get drafted the next year, but it's a lot harder. I thought to myself, I'm going to have to be really good at all the metrics and all the tests that they run, because they run a whole lot of tests, like a 100-meter sprint, and then they do I think a 1500, a 3K, a standing vertical leap. And I thought, I'm going to have to get good at all of these things in order for them to consider me. So I was pretty good at the sprints. I was pretty good at the jump, and I thought the distance is my weakness. So I started to train really hard for that. And very quickly, I think I did a time trial in the middle of senior school year in the 800 in about 2:06. And the teachers were like, "That's really good for training for a few months. Like, let's see how you go if you continue." And I still had a brace on my hands. So I couldn't play football. And then I trained really hard for a few more months. And fast forward, I ended up running in the national final in the 800 meters and ran 154. I had a bunch of more races in between that. And so very quickly, coaches were like, that's pretty talented. Like, you're going to, and I think I came 5th. I'm good at coming 5th at Australian Nationals. I did that a lot of times. So I was 5th in the under 18 high school national championships in that year, having trained from more or less April to November. That was in December, I think, or late November.
That's crazy.
And so that got me. And then a coach picked me up at that point, a pretty good middle distance coach in my hometown, and said, "You're only a couple of seconds away from making World Juniors that are in 2 years. You need to run under 150, under 152 or 151.5, I think it was." And he said, "I reckon that I can take you there." And so then I had to make a decision. Was it go down that path of trying to make World Juniors and then in 2006 and then the 2008 Olympics, or do I pursue the Australian Football League? And I weighed up my chances and thought my chances of making the Australian Football League now are probably pretty slim. So I went down the path of trying to make World Juniors, of which I didn't. I came 3rd at that national championships, and they unfortunately took 2, which is tough. World Juniors, I don't know what they do anymore, but they did take 2 then. And then, the Olympic trials. I don't think I made the final that year. I had a bit of an injury-riddled year, but then the following year, in 2009, I came 5th at the World Champs trials. So and then that's what sort of took me for the next few years through the middle distance. And then I sort of already explained how I got into the marathon, but that's how I got into middle distance anyway. It was more as a result of this injury and me thinking I've got to be really good at 1500 and 3K because they were the tests that the Australian Football League ran to determine if you'd be able to make the league. So
have you ever thought like how things would be different if you ended up going down the Australian Football League and like pursuing that? I mean, that's interesting, because it sounds like you had a chance in that as well.
I probably would have failed because it's very tough to make the league after that draft year. And if I didn't make it that following year, I probably would have just diverted down the same path as like the running path then. and thought,
Hmm.
okay, well, let's see if I can make be in contention for the Olympics in 2008, because that high school year in 2004 when I was 17, going from scratch to 154 in 6 months obviously showed that the ability to, maybe one day break 150 is definitely
Mm.
there.
Mm.
So I think I would have probably just diverted down that path a year later, I'd guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. That's like I feel like that's
Mm.
a very like unique story. It's kind of like reminiscent of Callum Epson. Is that his name?
I've heard that name before, but I can't think of
Yeah,
where
he's
I've
like a
heard it.
British middle
Yeah.
distance runner. He came from a football back, like soccer, but they call football. And
Okay.
like
Okay.
then he became like a really good middle distance runner. He's already doing crazy times and like same as you. His first year, he was already going crazy in the middle distance scene. So,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah, but I feel like that's a very like cool story. Let's talk about Sweat
Yeah.
Elite because that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on.
Sure.
Looking at your LinkedIn profile, you've worked a lot of jobs. You've had a lot of different positions. Um, how did you kind of end up with Sweat Elite, founding it in 2016? Like, what kind of led you down that path?
The honest answer, I'm 35 now, so obviously having graduated when I was 23, I have done a few different things, employment wise, and the honest answer was I was always a little bit curious about startups and working for myself, and I had a few jobs where I didn't really like the management above me that much. I just thought, I don't know. There was a lot of unnecessary pressure. This is in particular the one in Singapore I had, which has been my last job that I've been full time working for an employer. Um, there was a lot of good things about that role, but I just thought it was sort of the second time in a few years where I thought, I want to really. I'm a little bit tired of working for someone that doesn't see maybe the way that I do on things.
Hmm.
And I just thought, okay, at that point I was 29, and I thought there's probably only so many more years I can try starting a business myself before I think more seriously about, having a family or
Hmm.
getting married and these sorts of things. So I thought I was influenced by a few podcasts. I couldn't even tell you them all right now, about how, it was quite a bit easier when you're a little bit younger in your 20s to maybe have a go at starting a business.
Hmm.
And I had been involved in a couple of smaller businesses prior to, while I was working other jobs full time. But I thought, okay, I'd saved up quite a lot of money at that point, from working in Singapore and the other jobs. And I just thought, one thing I did think about when I was running middle distance was there wasn't really a very good media for really good athletes. Like there was Runner's World, that was really appealing to the person that was wanting to maybe break 20 minutes in a 5K or finish a marathon.
Yeah.
There was Flow Track that did some good stuff. But they focused mainly on, they did some really good Workout Wednesday stuff, and they live streamed events, which they still do obviously. And I thought there's not really a very good media company that publishes a lot of information on training. Like I was super curious all the time as a middle distance guy. Like what are these guys better than me doing in training? And what is Craig Mottram? I was lucky enough to do a little bit of training with him. Craig Mottram is one of Australia's best ever 1500 5K guys. When he was in Europe, and just learning about what he was doing, preparing for the 2012 Olympics and 2010 Commonwealth Games, where I was doing a little bit of training with him, sort of pacing him. I was so fascinated by that and all these methods I was learning. I thought, why isn't there a resource out there like, that people can access? And that's really where Sweat Elite was started. I had a few friends that were willing to do interviews to share more about their training. So it began by me interviewing people and just putting it on a website in terms of, the interview, basically transcript.
Hmm.
And then over time, we very quickly realized we're going to have to make some money if we want to keep this sustainable. So we turned them into small ebooks, and then we added a podcast a few years later, and then the video stuff now. So it's sort of just evolved over time to be more or less a media, platform where people can learn about how serious and professional athletes get as good as they are.
Yeah.
And I think the video content is by far the most engaging way to learn that, because obviously there's one thing reading these things, but another thing really observing them in training visually. I think that's a whole another level. So yeah, I think the video stuff is probably what most people maybe listening to your podcast know us for. And funnily enough, we've only been doing that for a little over a year, whereas Sweat Elites existed for 5.5, almost 6 years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you think that you've probably gained more traction from your YouTube channel than you did from your podcast and your training, follows the
Yes.
training of that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I say that for two reasons. One, over the last year when I've been traveling around, and if I ever meet people at events or people recognize me, quite often I try to sort of ask them, "Oh, cool! Like, where did you learn about us?" And by far the most common answer is, "Oh, I watch your videos." And that's by far the most common answer. But even looking at the analytics of the website, how many views we get in a month or a year on the website, how many downloads we get in the podcast, the videos is by far the most amount of views. So our website gets about 200,000 views a month, but there's many repeated people coming. The podcast gets about half of that, but then we get about almost 1 million views a month on YouTube. So it's by far the most, it gets us by far the most reach.
When did you start thinking about starting up the YouTube channel, and what was that process of, trying to take on your first few athletes? I mean,
so there's a good story to this actually. That was so 2019, 6 months before COVID started. So around September, October 2019, I was having a discussion with my colleague Tate, who writes a lot of the articles and has done a few podcasts. And we said, what's our next step here? Do we want to go into the video space or not? And we decided to do that. And then I made the decision in September to move to Boulder in January, just pre-COVID. And so I moved to Boulder at the end of January 2020. So about 6 weeks before COVID started, I got set up in a rental and I got camera equipment and stuff. And there was a couple of people I had in mind to film first. Parker Stinson included. The Tin Man guys, I met up with them and began planning some videos, and then COVID struck like the next week. And so I went home to Australia. I panicked and went home to Australia because you probably remember in the first couple of weeks of COVID, there was just a massive confusion around what is this thing and how bad is it really going to be? And, you're going to want to be in a place where you got family around you in case. And I have pretty bad asthma. And in the beginning of COVID, it was a real concern for asthmatics about maybe the respiratory issue being a big deal. So my parents were on the phone going, "You really better get home, because if this is a really problematic thing for asthmatics, then you're going to want to be somewhere where you have good care." So it turns out asthmatics aren't really at any more danger than others, but in the beginning, no one knew that. So I went home to Australia for a little over a year. I actually tried to get out of there a few times, but I was rejected by the government. We had extremely strict rules. So then I returned back so I left in March 2020, and then I returned in April 2021. So I was back in Australia for 13 months and kicked off the videos in May, the following month, got straight into it. So So to answer your question, we started thinking about it at the end of 2019, but only really launched it in April 2021 due to the delay due to COVID. Yeah.
So what is the process like of getting these athletes to come on your YouTube channel? Is it as simple as just like DMing them or finding their agents to reach out to them? What is that process like?
So when I first started, I thought there'd be a lot more talking to agents than there actually is. There's not very much of that. Occasionally, but most of the time it's just directly communicating with the athletes. A lot of the time it's via Instagram. Sometimes it's connected by another athlete. At the end of a workout, I'll say, Parker, you're good friends with Morgan. Is there any chance that Morgan will be interested? Here's his number. Text Morgan. It's very straightforward. Managers don't often really get in the way or are asked to be, to go by them. It does happen quite a few times where coaches sort of jump in and ask questions, and sometimes they actually overrule and say no, which is a little bit unfortunate. But it is their space and it's their training, so it is what it is. There's a few unfortunate. I'm not going to name names, but there's a few groups in the US that I just feel like I'm heavily biased, obviously, because I it's my YouTube channel and I'd love them on there, but they decline or don't answer, and they don't really do any videos with any other companies. And
I think I could guess the names.
Yeah. I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to piece that together. There's a few of which one group based here in Boulder. A couple of the athletes have been quite keen when I've actually communicated with them, but then the coaches overruled and said no every time. So it is what it is. But luckily, there's plenty of athletes out there that are open to it. So
When did you start thinking about scaling it more globally with your YouTube videos? Because I know in the beginning I assume it was a lot of you videoing in the US probably, right? And then eventually I started noticing the videos from international from all over Europe and Australia and all these other places. When did you kind of start thinking about doing that, or had that always been on the
Um,
mind?
so we started. No, it wasn't always. I mean, ultimately, I think going into the video space, we knew that at some point, if it was to be successful, we would try and go to Europe. But launching in May, I was very luckily connected with Angus Teaton, who has filmed all most of the videos out of Kenya. That was by chance. That's quite a long story how that came about, but it was basically through Tate, the same colleague of mine that I brought up before. He was friends with Angus, who was already over there doing another project, and he was quite keen. So that's where the videos from Kenya came. And then I just thought to myself, after doing, I think 4.5, 5 months in the US, where I sort of covered most of the athletes that I believe were open to the idea, I thought, okay, let's take a break here. Otherwise, we're sort of just repeating the athletes again. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity to head over to Europe, where I'd already been in touch with some athletes. So I think I left in the very end of November, and spent a few months over there. And I think it's probably Europe and the UK. I would say that there's more athletes and groups open to it than in the US. They don't tend to have the larger groups like Bauman and stuff over there. They're more individual and smaller training groups. So it's Europe's definitely probably an easier place for us to do it in a sense of accessibility. But yeah, I think I've gone away from your initial question, but I think it was around September, October, I thought, okay, I think it's time now to try and expand this over to Europe, because there's so many good athletes over there that we've got Kenya and US, happening. And I even did a little trip to Mexico to do some stuff with some Mexican athletes. But it's been good.
What takeaways have you gotten from, all these YouTube videos you producing, being in various places such as Kenya and in the US? What sort of takeaways have you gotten from going and seeing all these athletes and how they train? And I feel like a lot of preconceived notions that you could have might be, you might realize that that's not the case, that there's actually, I don't know. I feel like I have preconceived notions about professional athletes, but yeah, is there anything that kind of shocked you or something?
Not really. I think the thing that surprised me the most across the board with most athletes is a really specific thing that has changed my perspective on things. And it's like, this is a really minor detail, but it's just something that I've always done in the past. And it's like, I've always been really, whatever the program is given to me in terms of recovery times and intervals that or threshold workouts that are prescribed a pace or a time. I in the past, up until shooting these videos, I've been very, very strict on myself to try and hit those times and those recoveries. And if I've got a prescribed, say, 8x1K and the recovery is 2 minutes, in the past, I would have had exactly 2 minutes rest, like literally to the second. And one thing I've noticed across the board with a lot of these professional athletes is there's a lot more sort of ignoring that part of it and actually more running to how you feel. So if you need extra rest, oftentimes the recovery is not overly strict at all. It's like jog 200 and go again, or 2 to 3 minutes, and even if it goes to 3:30, it's no problem. Just keep going. And Rick Rojas, my current coach, who's the coach of Nell Rojas, one of the best American female marathoners at the moment, he's like that too. He's so lax about the recovery times, and he's also really willing to adjust the goal times in training if things are going well or if things aren't going well. I had a workout of 8 by a mile the other day, and it was supposed to start at 5:20, and I started at 5:13. And it's just work. They're really rough guides as opposed to strict guides. And I just would have thought professional athletes would be a lot more strict about these things, but turns out it's not really the case. Of course, there are some that are strict about it, but across the board, I'd say it's pretty lax. So that's one thing that I've really noticed. The other thing is probably not a huge surprise, but most of these athletes are just like you and me. They're just regular people. They also, worry about things. They also go into races with doubts. They question things all the time. It's easy to put these people that are on the TV on a pedestal and think that they're invincible a lot of the time, but they're really not.
Yeah.
So I think they're the two main things. But there's probably a few more minor things, but they're the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that second point is interesting because like I think Tim Manolete does a great job of like kind of showing that side of things because I think sometimes you watch the Sweaty Lee videos and you're like, man, they always look so good. Like
Mm.
although sometimes you also see that other side on Sweaty Lee too, but I think Tim Manolete is one YouTube channel I think of top of the head that does a good job, I think, of just showing that other side where like they have struggles, they have like doubts in their mind, like we're all the same
Yeah.
really, and
Yeah.
it's yeah. And like I saw,
They
sometimes I think
do a
it's
good
going to
job of
be
that.
hard. Sometimes I think it's going to be hard to get someone on the podcast, and then I reach out and like Lauren Ness, she was pretty easy to get on. Lauren Gosh, she was pretty easy to get on the
Yeah.
podcast. I kind of thought I wasn't going to get her on because she's like kind of a upcoming like star. I feel like she has a lot
Mm.
of potential, and she just got back to me like a day later and was like, "Yeah, I'll come on." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah. I feel like with these athletes, it's really about timing.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious, but like if you do your research, I'm sure that you do. Like if you do your research, if you know they've got a big race coming up in the next week, they're not going to respond. 99% of the time, not going to respond. Whereas if you catch them at a time where they're either, there's no race coming up, or I hate to say it, but like if they're injured, for example, like that's another time that it might be a good time to reach out. Of course, we don't want that for any athlete, but at the same time, they're going to have more time on their hands, and they're going to have more, more willingness to do that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's definitely about timing. So you just message her at a good time because she just had a lot of races. So I trained with Lauren Goss as well. And if you'd messaged her, in the period where she was doing track races every second weekend, it might have been a bit more difficult for you to get a hold of her. I don't know, although she's normally pretty open about joining podcasts and so on. But she's just finished her season. She's sort of now taking a little bit of, even though she's still training very hard, she's not really racing for a while. So you connected with her at the right time, and it is interesting a lot of the time. I'll never forget when I first messaged Paul Chelimo, because his videos have been our biggest, our widest reach. There's been one go way over 1 million views, and a couple more go about 500,000 views. And when I messaged him on Instagram, he wrote back straight away being like, "Sure, we're training here this time on Friday. Feel free to come along." I was like, "This is an Olympic medalist." Like,
That's awesome.
he was just like, "Sure thing. Like, here we go. Here it is. Here's the address." I was like,
Oh
"Wow!"
my
I remember it
gosh.
was like 5 minutes later. I couldn't believe it.
Did you like try
So
to build some
yeah.
credibility in your message? Like you're like, I'm Matt Fox from Sweat Elite. Like, do you want to come on? Or were you just like, hey, do you want to come on? And he just like
Oh, I
said
just
yeah.
wrote to him saying, we've started a YouTube channel recently. We've had Sara Hall. I think one good way to approach is just to mention some of the names that have
Yeah.
recently been on. So I said Parker Stinson, Sara Hall. I think Craig Engels had maybe been on at that point. And he obviously read that and thought, oh, these guys that are some of the top US athletes are jumping on there, and he just said sure. So yeah.
Yeah. All right, we only have 8 minutes left. So I want to talk a little bit
Okay.
about Berlin Marathon. I respect your
Sure.
time, so I want to keep it short.
No worries.
But yeah, tell me a little bit about Berlin Marathon. How's your training going? How are you feeling? I mean, you're coming to almost a month left. Are you 6 weeks? Is it 6 weeks left?
Yeah, 5.5 weeks
Five and a
now.
half weeks?
Yeah, so 37 days. I'm counting down the days now. That's when it's getting close. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's been tricky because people, if anyone's watched my series, they're gonna roll their eyes at this because I've complained about this to no end. But I'm so bad in the heat. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm very good in the cold when it's 30 degrees, 35. That's my perfect marathon racing temperature, about 30, 35, freezing. So it's been so hot here lately. Every morning when we're training by 7 a.m., when we're warming up, it's 75, 80 degrees. So every workout I'm struggling, but I'm getting them all done. But the times are not flash. And I know they're not flash because one, we're at altitude. It's not really high here. It's 5,300 feet, 600 meters. But that still will hinder, will have an effect on your pacing. Sorry, my internet Yeah, it's all good. And then add the heat to that, it's like everything is just way slower than normal. But
Hmm.
I am progressing for sure. I haven't really hit any workouts out of the park, but then I don't think that's really necessary. I've seen countless examples of athletes that have run extraordinarily well. The first one comes to mind is Scott Forble at the last Boston Marathon when he ran 2:08. And I listened to an interview of him afterwards, and he said, "I didn't do anything special in training. I just ticked all the boxes and got all the mileage data and turned up and ran really well."
Yeah.
Nell Rojas is the same. She shared a lot about her build-ups to her successful races, and oftentimes there's nothing very special going on. It's just about, doing everything that you can and being consistent. And I feel like I'm really in that boat right now. I'm not really doing anything overly special. But yeah, I'm able to, I've been quite consistent. I've been at around that 85 to 90 miles a week, which is quite high for me. Before I ran 220 at Indianapolis last year, I was averaging a little under 70 miles a week, which is, I may have broken the record for the lowest amount of miles you ever run 220. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so the consistency has been there, and yeah, I think now that it's getting a little. This week has definitely been a turn in the weather. It's a bit cooler in the mornings now, so yeah, that's going to help for sure. And I've got a big 10-mile time trial in the morning tomorrow morning. So
Good luck.
actually, no, it's been changed to 15K now, which is slightly less, 9 point something miles.
Yeah.
So if I can do that if I can do that faster than my goal marathon pace at altitude, it's going to be a little bit warm. I'll be happy with that. So I'm going to aim for that 5:15 to 5:18 per mile pace, which is about my marathon pace. So yeah, we'll see. But the goal is up to 20. I'm still on for that, and I'm excited. Yeah,
I'm very excited for you as well. I think it's going to be good.
Thank you very much.
How have you liked training under Rick?
He's great.
How's that experience been? I mean, have you had coaches? I'm sure you've had a lot of coaches before, especially as a middle distance athlete, but coming out of the long distance scene, were you coaching yourself at any point, or how is that experience now compared to the past for your marathon training? I guess.
So I had two coaches when I was competing in the middle distances. They were both great. But since I've returned to the marathon, this is the first coach I've had. I actually coached myself to 220. And yeah, it's been good. He's very laid back. He's very, he's very, just one second. Yeah. Sorry, there's just a
no worries.
Cut that part out. There's just a little animal in the house. He's really, really laid back. But at the same time, he really thinks through very carefully what he's programming. And yeah, I get along with him really well, and I'm really a big fan of his philosophy around. I think the thing that attracted me to him was I realized that when I ran 220, my 10K time of 30:41, which is I've never run faster than that. I really needed to improve that 10K time down to under 30 minutes in order to run sort of 2:17, 2:16. And I'd heard him say a few times in interviews how crucial that was to work on your 10K and 5K in order to bring that down. And I thought it was a good time now that I've been able to do a lot of marathon work to try and work more on that 5 and 10K. And I think he offered to help, and I took the opportunity up. So it's worked well so far.
Great. All right, we got 3 minutes left, so I want to go through a quick little fun section. You just got to choose one or the other. I'll say it to you. You choose. So first of all, track or road?
Road.
Okay, that makes sense. Indoor or outdoor track?
I like indoor tracks, actually. Yeah, I like them both, but I'll go with indoor. Yeah.
As an 800 guy, that's interesting. That's an interesting answer.
I've done a few workouts on indoor tracks over the last couple of years, and I've enjoyed just the quick loops and the banking. I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Cross country or track? Did you do cross country? You didn't even do cross country.
No,
I don't even know why I had that down. Split shorts or half tights?
Half tights.
Okay. Running hat or no hat?
No hat.
Okay. Tempos or speed work?
Tempos. I love tempos nowadays. Yeah,
absolutely. Long runs or workouts?
Long runs.
Okay. Half marathon or marathon?
Marathon. I'm appalling at half. I don't know what it is. I can't do a half marathon. I've never run one. My half marathon best time is my first half of Indianapolis.
Right. You ran 68 something?
68 something. Yeah. It was really comfortable too. I don't know how I haven't run faster than that in a half marathon. I've just blown up every time I've run one and just jogged basically the last few miles. I've been so lactic. I don't know. I just haven't paced one very well. So
yeah, you'll have to do one in the future, maybe you'll be able to drop that down a little bit. Maybe
I've
go
got one
66.
planned in a couple of weeks in Seattle, but the course is really hilly, so it's just
Okay.
we'll see how we go. Yeah.
Seattle's tough. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You give kudos to a lot of people on Strava, or do you kind of only give it to impressive Strava posts?
I, definitely don't just only give it to impressive ones, but I would say I do give it not a lot, but just
Somewhere in the middle.
averagely. Yeah,
Okay.
somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Coaching individuals or team?
Team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Conservative racing or just going all out from the start?
Oh, you got to be conservative in the marathon.
Yeah. What about the 800?
Yeah.
What about the 800?
All out.
All out.
In the
Absolutely.
800.
I feel like you have to in that.
Yeah.
Sunday long runs or Saturday long runs?
Sunday. Doesn't matter to me, really.
And training or racing?
Both. Training. If I had to do one or the other, and focus on one, training probably. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Might get kicked out any second. So Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and best of luck with your Berlin training. I really hope you get under that barrier, and I'll be following your training, watching all the videos.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you having me on. This was a great interview. I really appreciate the questions. So
we'll have to talk after Berlin.
Maybe. Yeah, of course. Let's do it.
All right. Awesome.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks, Jacob.
Have a good one.
Appreciate it. See you, man. Bye.